Before we begin, let me share something that might just be the spark you need. Have you ever dreamed of starting your own podcast? I was once just an armchair researcher, paranormal enthusiast, and one of the best secret true crime detectives that nobody ever heard of. But with a little bit of passion and the right tools, I've managed to reach listeners in over 75 countries, and if I can do it, so can you. Buzzsprout makes the entire process simple and seamless, from recording to sharing your voice with the world. They've got all the features you need to get your podcast up and running, and fast. Plus, here's a little incentive from me to help you get started. When you sign up for a paid membership using my link in the show notes, you'll get $20 in Buzzsprout credit to help you hit the ground running. Your stories deserve to be heard. So let's get it out there.
The following episode includes content of a sexual and adult nature and is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
In Hollywood of the 1950s, audiences around the world were captivated by Rock Hudson. He surpassed the title of iconic American movie star. He was a symbol of masculinity, handsome, rugged, and irresistibly charming. The #1 box office draw in the country, Rock Hudson seemed like the epitome of the American dream. But what if I told you that this perfect man was living a lie that nearly destroyed him? Behind the scenes, Hudson's life was a carefully constructed facade, built by those he trusted and shaped around devastating secrets and betrayals. Ordered by his manipulative agent to never be seen with certain people, Hudson's truth remained hidden in plain sight, until it couldn't anymore. As a queer person, Rock Hudson's story resonates deeply with me. In another world or another time, his experience could have been mine. And for hundreds of queer individuals, it was. Rock's celebrity status allows us to know his story in greater detail, but his struggle was one shared by many who lived and suffered in silence. It's a bit different from our usual deep dives into specific movies, but it's a story that deeply embodies the concept of a cinematic secret and the dark side of the silver screen, a side of Hollywood that many only know in fragments, if at all. Rock Hudson's struggle wasn't just a personal battle, it was a societal one. When the AIDS crisis hit, decades of secrets and lies were exposed, forever changing the course of history. This is the story of Rock Hudson, the romantic comedy star who symbolized American masculinity, and what happened when his carefully crafted image was shattered. It's a tale of hidden truths, societal pressures, and the mental torture that comes with living a double life. Beyond the silver screen,
go ahead, make my day.
A world of dreams and fantasies unfolds.
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
You can't handle the truth!
But within its shadows, a hidden realm of intrigue and mystery awaits.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
I could have been a contender.
Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, she walks into mine.
Cinematic Secrets beckons you to journey into the depths where untold stories shape the films we cherish. Uncover the secrets that propelled these classics to greatness, and unearth the darker truths lurking beneath the surface. Beyond the glamour and allure lies a hidden narrative, a side untold. This time we lift the curtain and peer into the darkness that resides in the very heart of the silver screen. Journey with us as we explore the forbidden corners, where truth blends with fiction and legends are born. This is Cinematic Secrets, the dark side of the silver screen. Our story begins during the harshest years of the Great Depression, in a cramped one-bedroom bungalow in Winnetka, Illinois. The home held an extended family of 11, all squeezed into this tiny space, struggling to get by. Amidst the chaos and scarcity was a happy kid named Roy Jr., who loved playing on the nearby farms and entertaining his cousins, aunts, and uncles who lived under the same crowded roof. But not everything was joyful in young Roy's life. His father, Roy Sr., felt no strong bond to the family. When Roy Jr. was just 6 years old, he came home from a relative's farm to devastating news. His mother explained that his dad had packed a suitcase and walked out on them. This abandonment was a turning point for Roy Jr. The once lively boy became sad and withdrawn, enveloped by a sense of loneliness. Family members noticed he seemed to lose interest in most things, except one: movies. Roy would disappear into local theaters, finding solace in the flickering lights of the silver screen. It was here he developed his first crush on handsome leading man John Hall, and dreamed of joining his screen idols as an actor himself. Roy once confided to a friend about a reoccurring dream he had. In the dream, he saw a diamond surrounded by points of light. He'd wake up and tell himself that that diamond was him, destined to shine brightly one day, escaping the confines of Winnetka to become a famous movie star. But dreams like these were kept secret, especially after his mother remarried. Wallace Fitzgerald, his new stepfather, was a stern and unforgiving man who believed Roy Jr. was too weak. Wallace confiscated many toys he deemed girly, punished Roy for showing emotion, and when Roy revealed his aspiration to be an actor, Wallace beat him. Roy Harold Scherer Jr., the boy who would become Rock Hudson, learned early in life that survival often meant lying about who he was and what he loved, a core tenet of his identity he was never truly able to shake until the tragic end of his life. Only a few trusted people knew about his ambition to become an actor. One of them was his mother, who wanted to help him achieve his dreams. Shortly after Roy graduated from high school, his mother made a bold decision. She left her abusive second husband, and together, she and Roy moved to Pasadena, California, to be closer to Hollywood. While Roy studied acting at USC, they hoped to carve out a new life in the heart of the film industry. But there was another reason that drew them to the West Coast. After Roy's biological father walked out on them, he settled in Los Angeles and opened an appliance store not far from the USC campus. Roy had spent years longing for a connection with his father. One day between classes, he tracked down his father's address, mustered his courage, and showed up unannounced. At first, the reunion was heartwarming. His father welcomed him in and even offered Roy a place to stay while he attended school. It seemed like a chance to mend their fractured relationship. But everything changed when Roy revealed his dream of becoming an actor. His father recoiled, dismissing acting as unstable, and urged Roy to abandon his dreams and join him in the appliance business instead. Desperate for his father's approval, Roy agreed to give it a try. For 6 grueling months, his father sent him door to door selling vacuum cleaners. But despite his best efforts, Roy didn't sell a single one. His heart just wasn't in it. Sensing his son's lack of passion for retail, his father fired him and kicked him out of the house, shattering Roy's hopes for a reconciled relationship. With no money coming in, Roy had to drop out of USC and take the only job he could find, driving a delivery truck. Determined to keep his acting dream alive, he bought the best suit he could afford, a shabby outfit that barely fit. Between deliveries, he'd drive to the gates of movie studios, change into his ill-fitting suit, and hang around outside, hoping to be noticed by producers among the individuals seeking for work as extras in whatever was currently being filmed. But it was all in vain. Rejected. Ignored. Roy's dream of becoming a star seemed totally out of reach. After all, how does a truck driver become a movie star anyway? As he pondered his next steps, Roy stumbled upon a world he never knew existed. In the mid-1940s, Los Angeles had a relatively large gay scene, if you knew where to look. Homosexuality was considered both a crime and a mental illness, forcing queer people to live quietly and underground. In a later memoir, Roy recalled the first time he stumbled into a bar where a drag queen was singing risque songs to an audience of men. He joined them, and to his surprise, they invited him to a nearby beach favored by gay men. Coming from a small conservative town, Roy had never known any openly queer people before. But now he had friends, people he didn't have to hide from. Even better, some of these new friends worked in showbiz. In the midst of his new social scene, Roy encountered a couple named Mark and George. They were a few years older than Roy and both working actors, offering him a window into a world of stability and domestic happiness he had never known. They took him under their wing, providing the kind of supportive father figures he had always yearned for. Mark and George's happy, committed relationship ignited a spark of hope in Roy. He saw a future in them where he too could find love and companionship. That hope was realized when a mutual friend introduced him to Ken Hodge, a charismatic radio producer. From the moment they met, the attraction between Roy and Ken was undeniable. They quickly became inseparable, and before long, they moved into a cozy apartment together in Hollywood. Ken, with his extensive experience and connections in the radio industry, was determined to help Roy achieve his dreams of stardom. Taking on the role of Roy's unofficial agent, Ken arranged for professional headshots, showcasing Roy's striking features and potential. He introduced Roy to his colleagues, opening doors that had previously been firmly shut. Ken even hosted glamorous parties, where Roy could mingle with industry insiders, expanding his network and getting closer to his dream. It was likely at one of Ken's lively parties that Roy crossed paths with Henry Wilson, a powerful Hollywood agent known for representing some of the biggest stars of the time. But Henry had a dark reputation, pressuring his clients for sexual favors in exchange for any work. Intrigued by Roy's potential, Henry extended an invitation for a private meeting at his house to discuss Roy's future in Hollywood. When Roy arrived, Henry was prepared. As he watched Roy approach the house, he turned on the sprinklers. By the time Roy reached the door, his cheap suit was soaked through. Henry welcomed him in, helping him out of the drenched clothes, and then made his pitch. He promised to make Roy a star, but there was one significant obstacle. Ken, Roy's boyfriend and unofficial agent. Henry made it clear that if Roy wanted his help, he'd have to cut all ties with Ken. It was a heart-wrenching decision. Henry had connections with the most powerful people in Hollywood, working closely with major studios and already transforming many aspiring actors into household names. He could open doors that Ken, despite his best efforts, could never access. Roy returned to Ken with a heavy heart, explaining that he was going to sign with Henry. Was, he rationalized, just good business. Ken was devastated. Feeling betrayed and heartbroken, he moved out of the apartment they shared. Unable to bear the pain or face their mutual friends, Ken relocated to Europe, and according to his family, Ken never fell in love again. If you're tuning into the show regularly, you're probably just as curious as I am about the mysteries that surround us. That curiosity is what drives us, isn't it? To seek answers, to connect with something beyond the ordinary. Well, some of you may not know this, but outside of creating podcasts, I'm also a professional tarot reader and natural intuitive. So I wanted to make sure you're aware of some ways that we can go deeper and more personal together. Whether you're looking for a quick 30-minute reading or a deeper, hour-long psychic channeling, I'm here to help you find the clarity you're seeking. Follow the link in the show notes to book your session directly with me, and use the code PODCAST for 10% off your first reading. And if you're more into exploring these mysteries as part of our community, I've got something for you too. By joining our Patreon at the $5 tier or above, you'll get access to our monthly Tarot Magic episodes, collective readings that dive into the energies surrounding us all, just like we've done on the show, now available exclusively to our Patreon members. I wanted to make sure our community can continue to grow together, deepening our connection and exploring the quiet voices of the universe with a trusted friend by your side. I'm here for you, and I'm excited to see where this path takes us. And thanks. Roy hadn't meant to hurt Ken, but the damage was done. With his relationship in ruins, Roy was now in the predatory clutches of the powerful agent Henry Wilson, who was determined to make him a star. One of Henry's first moves was to give Roy a tougher, more marketable name: Rock Hudson. However, some close to Roy claimed it was actually Ken who came up with the name, a fact Henry conveniently overlooked. Regardless of who named him, by the late 1940s, Roy Jr. was undergoing a dramatic transformation. From an awkward, aspiring actor, he was becoming Rock Hudson, the epitome of American masculinity. But despite his new manly moniker, Rock wasn't an easy sell. He lacked formal training and was painfully shy, often making poor first impressions. Henry Wilson took it upon himself to refine Rock's image. He coached him to appear sophisticated and worldly, often advising him to lie about his age to seem more experienced. Yet in an early meeting with the producer, when asked how old he was, Rock was so flustered that he turned to Henry and asked, "How old am I?" Henry saw bigger problems, though. He considered Rock's mannerisms too effeminate. He criticized Rock's high-pitched voice, his frequent giggling, and the way he swayed his hips. Henry watched Rock like a hawk, even going so far as to smack his hand when he held a cigarette too loosely, or corrected his hip movements with physical reprimands. Despite the intense training, Rock struggled to shed his nervousness. In one infamous meeting with Lucille Ryman Carroll, head of talent at MGM, Rock tripped over his own feet and nearly smashed a glass table. Henry caught him just in time, but Lucille noticed Henry holding Rock's hand for the rest of the meeting. To her, it looked like they were lovers, a significant problem given MGM's anti-gay hiring policies for their stars. They relegated gay men to art-related roles, particularly in the stylized era of silent films that was rapidly coming to an end, but never leading parts. Sensing that Rock wouldn't last a minute at MGM, Lucille politely thanked them for their time and sent them on their way. Desperation can lead to bold moves, and that's exactly what Henry Wilson did when he brought Rock Hudson to meet Raoul Walsh, a director known for his tough, no-nonsense style. Walsh specialized in gritty gangster films, intense war movies, and rugged westerns. He wasn't initially impressed with Rock's acting chops, but he needed a good-looking face for his upcoming World War II film, Fighter Squadron. Walsh's reaction was blunt, quote, "At the very least, he'll make good scenery." He signed Rock to a 1-year contract and had him report to the set for the film. It was Rock's first foray into the world of cinema, but his role was minimal, mostly background with a line or two. Even in this minor part, Rock struggled. Unfamiliar with the nuances of film acting, he frequently stood in the wrong spots, blocking the camera and ruining takes. His big line, "You're gonna need a bigger blackboard," became infamous on set for how often he flubbed it. Eventually, it was reassigned to another actor, and Rock was left with a simpler line delivered off-camera. "Pretty soon, you're gonna have to write smaller numbers." Walsh, exasperated by Rock's inexperience, had already committed to a contract and couldn't simply let him go. So Walsh found other use for him, sending Rock to run errands, paint Walsh's house, and drive his car. Seeing no potential, he decided to cut his losses and sold Rock's contract to Universal, feeling fortunate to be rid of him. Initially discouraged, this twist of fate turned out to be a blessing for Rock. Universal, at the time, had an acting school dedicated to nurturing new talent. Here, Rock finally received the formal training he desperately needed. Transforming Rock Hudson into a screen-ready star took immense effort from many. Universal's acting school was crucial, offering him lessons in acting, diction, and presence. It was a rigorous process, but it began to mold him into the Hollywood icon he would eventually become. In post-World War II America, audiences craved leading men who were almost cartoonishly rugged, unemotional, assertive, brave, and aggressive. These qualities were nearly the complete opposite of Rock Hudson in real life. At Universal's acting school, his instructors were determined to transform him into this ideal. They drilled him on delivering lines with confidence, and enrolled him in lessons for boxing, horseback riding, and even sword fighting. Rock faced an uphill battle in developing a more macho persona, but he was committed. Over time, his fellow students began to notice a shift in him. One of these students was Yvonne DiCarlo, the future Lily Munster, who appeared with him in several films. She observed Rock's style evolving. He was becoming more confident, swaggering, and bold. The teachers didn't relent. One vocal coach took a particularly extreme approach. He had Rock deliberately get sick and then scream for hours to tear his vocal cords, hoping they'd sound deeper when they healed. Amazingly, this method worked, but it came at a high cost. Rock lost his ability to sing well for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, Universal's PR team was hard at work crafting Rock's public image as a rugged new star. They planted news stories and arranged a photo shoot featuring Rock and his roommate, actor Bon Preble, engaging in traditionally masculine activities around the house. Ironically, these photos might appear today as depicting a gay couple with intense sexual tension, which is even more ironic considering in reality, when the cameras weren't rolling, Rock and Bob were casually hooking up on a regular basis, a truth the public never suspected. At the time, the photos were received as an intimate glimpse behind closed doors at a pair of confident, attractive, Hollywood heterosexual bachelors. As Rock's personal life and public persona grew increasingly divergent, and the world took notice of his staggeringly handsome face and Adonis-like physique, the pressures only continued to mount. He was living a double life, navigating the precarious balance between who he truly was and who Hollywood wanted him to be, all while beginning to get a taste of the life he had been dreaming of since living in his cramped one-bedroom bungalow. To him, everything had been worth it. Despite all the training and effort, Hollywood executives still relegated Rock Hudson to minor roles in low-budget action films. As his contract neared its end, the threat of being out of work with few prospects loomed large. Sensing the urgency, his agent Henry Wilson believed Rock just needed more publicity to capture Hollywood's attention. So, in late 1949, Henry concocted a bold plan. Hey listeners, it's Jeremy from When Walls Can Talk. You know, our spaces, our homes, tell stories too, just like the ones we explore together on this podcast. And that's why I love Society 6. They bring together incredible art from independent artists around the world, offering pieces that echo the mystery, history, and beauty that we both love, without breaking the bank. Whether you're looking to add a touch of the eerie with a haunting print, or find a vintage-inspired piece that connects you to the past, Society 6 has something special for your home. And here's the best part. When you shop using my link in the show notes, you're not just bringing home art that speaks to you. You're also supporting the show and helping independent artists continue their craft. So why not make your space a reflection of your story? Click the link below and tell your story with art that speaks. Every year, Hollywood stars gathered for the Photographer's Ball, a grand costume party where celebrities donned outrageous outfits and invited paparazzi to capture the spectacle and help garner new attention. The event was a win-win. Photographers got sensational photos to sell, and stars received a flood of free press. Henry decided to make Rock the star of the show by pairing him with Vera Ellen, a hugely popular actress and truly one of my absolute favorites from the era. You may remember her as the sensational dancer made famous as one of the Haynes sisters in the classic film White Christmas. To ensure they stood out, he ordered them to strip down and cover themselves in gold paint and carry swords, transforming them into living Oscar statues. As soon as Rock and Vera Ellen entered the ball, they were swarmed by photographers. The stunt worked brilliantly. For weeks, newspapers and magazines were plastered with photos of the dazzling duo. This sudden surge of publicity caught the attention of two influential executives at Universal. One was Ross Hunter, himself a closeted gay producer celebrated for his glamorous soap opera melodramas. The other was Ed Mole, who had a more straight-laced public persona but, according to Rock, would occasionally summon him to his office for private rendezvous. The publicity from the photographer's ball convinced Hunter and Mole that Rock's talent was being squandered in pulpy action films. They saw potential for him in romantic roles and had the perfect project in mind. Rock's big break came with a film called Magnificent Obsession. In this movie, Rock played a selfish, rich playboy who, after causing an accident that blinds a widow, falls in love with her. Determined to win her heart, he pretends to be a selfless hero. By the end of the film, her love transforms him, and he realizes that the kind, generous persona he'd been pretending to be is who he was truly meant to be. This role was pivotal for Rock, marking the beginning of a reoccurring theme in his career. Playing men who pretend to be someone they're not. And he nailed it. Magnificent Obsession was a significant hit, with Rock perfectly embodying the post-war ideal of confident, strong masculinity. He shared excellent chemistry with his co-star, Jane Wyman. Fun fact, Jane Wyman had recently divorced her first husband, a struggling actor named Ronald Reagan, who would re-enter Rock's life in a pivotal way many decades later. With the success of Magnificent Obsession, it became clear that these were the roles Rock was destined to play. If he wasn't born for them, he was certainly shaped for them through the intensive training of his agent, teachers, and the carefully crafted PR team around him. He became the perfect archetype of American masculinity of the time. The success was followed by a string of popular romances, many produced by gay men who saw in Rock the ideal leading man, or simply shamelessly lusted over him. Following the success of Magnificent Obsession, Rock Hudson starred in a series of hits like All That Heaven Allows, One Desire, and Never Say Goodbye. These movies played perfectly to the 1950s ideal of the American man, and audiences flocked to see Rock. Universal Studios and Henry Wilson worked tirelessly to maintain this persona in real life as well. They staged dates with various starlets and planted news stories about his supposed romantic escapades. But this public image was as fictional as the characters he portrayed on screen. The real Rock Hudson was a shy homebody who enjoyed needlepoint, cooking, and crosswords. When he wasn't working, he preferred the company of Mark and George, the couple who had taken him under their wings years ago. On set, he was known for his playful flirtations with other actors. Despite the public facade of a man searching for the right woman, the truth was that Rock was yearning to find the right man. If there was any aspect of his public persona, especially on camera, that hinted at the real him, it was his roles and character as a hopeless romantic. But while his characters found love on screen, Rock's reality was far more complicated and painful. Rock Hudson's life was a bittersweet tale of achieving his dreams yet never being able to fully live them. He had reached the pinnacle of Hollywood success, yet he couldn't be celebrated for who he truly was. The constant need to hide his true identity was a heavy burden. The loneliness and the emotional strain of living a double life, of longing for acceptance but knowing it was always out of reach, is hard to imagine for us today, but was a painful reality for so many over the years. For Rock, the applause and admiration from fans were a hollow echo, masking a deep, unfulfilled yearning for genuine love and acceptance. Rock Hudson's close friends, Mark and George, knew he was searching for love. One evening, they invited Rock to dinner with a friend named Jack Navar, another handsome young actor who, coincidentally, was also a client of Henry Wilson. Jack was incredibly nervous about meeting Rock, and spent most of the evening avoiding him. But after dinner, Rock struck up a conversation with Jack. Sensing the chemistry between them, Mark and George discreetly turned down the lights and stepped outside. The evening culminated in Rock inviting Jack back to his place. What started with listening to music soon led to dinner, and eventually to Rock's bedroom. This marked the beginning of a passionate whirlwind romance between Rock and Jack. They soon moved in together, spending nearly all their time in each other's company. They even alternated having dinners with each other's mothers, but their relationship had to remain hidden from the public eye, necessitating elaborate measures to maintain their secret. To keep up appearances, Rock and Jack engineered their dates to look like business meetings. They frequented restaurants with friends, ensuring there was at least one woman or an odd number of men at the table to avoid suspicion. They never allowed themselves to be photographed together, maintaining an air of professional detachment in public. Rock's friend, Joe Carberry, recalls that during that time, nobody lived openly as gay, especially in Hollywood. Rock longed to, but the societal pressures and risks were too great. This secrecy bothered him deeply. To express their love discreetly, Rock and Jack developed a sweet private code. When they wanted to say, "I love you," without arousing suspicion, they'd knock 3 times on whatever surface was available to them. However, not everyone saw things the same way. Henry Wilson, who was no stranger to casual flings himself, many of which were with his own clients in his office and of questionable consensuality, was fine with the occasional hookup. But he viewed committed relationships as a significant risk. They could lead to exposure and gossip. However, in my personal opinion, I think he might have also considered their relationships as a threat to his control and domination over them, or perhaps a reflection of his extreme jealousy. When they were single, he could control every element of these wildly handsome, impressionable young men, willing to do anything for the opportunity at stardom. Relationships took that power away. One of Rock Hudson's later boyfriends, Lee Garlington, said, "We were ordered by Henry Wilson, that evil agent of his, never to have our picture taken together because somebody would see it and know that we were gay." The longer Rock and Jack stayed together, the more Henry Wilson wanted to drive them apart, just as he had done with Rock's previous boyfriend, Ken. Henry found his next opportunity to destroy Rock's love life when he was in Italy shooting the film Captain Lightfoot. He called up Jack and casually suggested, "Rock's away and you're just sitting there. Why don't you and Phyllis take a trip?" Phyllis was Henry's secretary, Phyllis Gates, a young woman from the Midwest who had moved to LA a few years earlier. She was around the same age as Rock and Jack and was friendly with many of Henry's clients. Henry told Jack that Phyllis had a vacation coming up and no one to go with, suggesting that Jack keep her company. Thinking it sounded like a fun idea, Jack borrowed Rock's car, picked up Phyllis, and they headed out for a drive. By all accounts, the trip was uneventful. However, the story that reached Rock was quite different. Somehow, word got to Rock that Jack had been hosting wild orgies at Rock's own house while he was away, that the police had been called, and that the home had been robbed. Furious, Rock called Jack and the two had a heated argument. Jack explained that he wasn't even in town and asked Henry to corroborate his story, but Henry refused. He told Jack that his relationship with Rock was a threat to Rock's career, and that he and his associates at Universal would do anything in their power to come between them. According to Jack, Henry's words were menacing, quote, "The studio is capable of taking extreme measures to protect a property." Feeling terrible, and seeing that Rock was surrounded by people determined to keep him isolated, Jack realized their relationship couldn't survive under such conditions. When Rock returned from Italy, he found that Jack had moved out, leaving behind a heartbroken Rock. Rock's life was filled with such painful episodes, where personal happiness was constantly sacrificed by others for the sake of his career. He was deeply unhappy about how things ended with Jack, but Henry Wilson was delighted. With Jack out of the picture, Henry could orchestrate more heterosexual publicity for his client. This was becoming increasingly urgent. By this point, Rock was nearing his 30s, and despite being seen on numerous dates with women, there was no indication of any serious relationship. In the mid-1950s, it was unusual for a 29-year-old star not to be in a steady relationship or married. Hollywood had an unwritten rule for its actors, both gay and straight. Thou shalt be married, happily and respectably married, whether you like it or not. Magazines started to take notice, and Life ran an article openly demanding that Rock get married or explain why not. To quell the rumors, Henry arranged for Rock to go on dates in highly public places with a familiar face, his secretary, Phyllis Gates. By all accounts, Rock and Phyllis got along well. They shared a sense of humor, had many interests in common, and enjoyed each other's company. Some people who knew them even claimed that Phyllis had dated women. However, Phyllis later denied this, insisting she had no idea Rock was gay until years later. The truth remains elusive, however, given her later reaction, I find this hard to believe myself. For context, in the 1950s, homosexuality was so taboo that it was never discussed in polite company. An accusation could end a person's career or even send them to prison. As a result, it was considered polite to ignore any talk about homosexuality or to deny it outright, even among queer people. Denying that someone was gay was seen as the ethical and loyal thing to do, a way of protecting that person and being a good friend. This complicated landscape makes it hard to determine who knew what. Regardless, Rock and Phyllis grew close and were often seen together, which helped to quell some of the gossip about Rock, but not all of it. Certain individuals were determined to destroy Rock's career. Among the tabloids of the 1950s, the dirtiest and sleaziest was a magazine called Confidential. Owned by right-wing Republican Robert Harrison, who despised homosexuals, Confidential aimed primarily to expose closeted celebrities and destroy their careers. As one of Harrison's reporters put it, Hollywood should be grateful. We're doing the industry a favor by exposing all these perverts. Rock's friends, Mark and George, recalled the pervasive fear among gay men in Hollywood. George later said, quote, "Every month, when Confidential came out, our stomachs would turn. Which of us would be in it?" Harrison had a network of informants and was relentless in tracking down people who could ruin Rock's life. The first target was Rock's former roommate, Bob, the same one he hooked up with and was in all those photos with all those years ago. Harrison approached Bob with an offer of $10,000 to spill everything he knew about Rock's personal life. That's around $115,000 in today's money. Bob had lived with Rock, hooked up with him, and knew all the intimate details. However, Bob turned Confidential down. Some say it was because Rock had already paid Bob more to keep quiet. Next, Harrison found someone with potentially more damaging information and a possible axe to grind. Jack Navar, Rock's ex-boyfriend whom Henry Wilson had driven away. Jack's acting career was faltering, and he needed cash. Harrison's offer of $10,000 was a significant sum. Jack considered the offer, but ultimately made a different call. Not to Harrison, but to Henry Wilson, tipping him off about the plot to take down Rock. Despite the tough times he was facing, Jack wouldn't betray his former lover. Henry, however, didn't share Jack's sense of honor. Upon hearing of Confidential's plans, he reached out to Harrison with a deal. In exchange for dropping the Rock Hudson story, he offered dirt on some of his other clients, sacrificing his career for Rock's. Harrison accepted the deal, and Confidential ran an expose on another actor instead, Tab Hunter. Despite the deal with Confidential, Henry Wilson knew Rock Hudson's safety was precarious. Rumors circulated that another former lover had compromising photos of Rock and intended to use them for blackmail. Henry, determined to protect his star, hired a private investigator to locate the man and retrieve the incriminating material. When the man refused to hand over the photos, Henry's goons resorted to violence, beating him up and taking the pictures by force. Rock's numerous close calls led his friend George to remark that Rock either had an angel on his shoulder or had made a pact with the devil. Henry Wilson knew that mere damage control wouldn't suffice forever. They needed a more permanent solution to the constant threat of exposure. In the summer of 1955, Rock walked into Henry's office with a small box in hand. He handed it to Phyllis Gates, Henry's secretary. Rock told her it was a gift he had received for appearing on a TV show. When Phyllis opened the box, she found a diamond ring inside. Confused and surprised, she looked at Rock, who insisted, "I want you to have it." Phyllis, unsure if this was a proposal, initially refused, but Rock was adamant. Details of what happened next are murky and vary depending on who tells the story. Nevertheless, a few weeks later, Rock and Phyllis were at a courthouse, filling out a marriage certificate. Phyllis claimed that she and Rock had fallen in love quickly and couldn't wait to marry. However, some of Rock's friends believed that Henry and Universal executives had pressured Rock into the marriage to quash the persistent rumors about his sexuality. Regardless of how it happened, it was clear that Henry Wilson orchestrated the entire event. He even chose Phyllis's dress. After the ceremony, instead of calling their families, Rock and Phyllis were instructed to contact reporters. The marriage was a major surprise and quickly became headline news, dominating celebrity magazines for weeks. Any rumors about Rock's homosexuality were effectively drowned out, much to the delight of Henry and Universal. Initially, it seemed Rock and Phyllis had a genuine connection. They went on double dates with Mark and George, and to their friends, they appeared warm and affectionate. However, the public image of a happily married couple was another carefully constructed facade to protect Rock's career. While Rock Hudson's personal life was filled with turmoil and secrecy, his career was thriving like never before. Offers were flooding in, and one of the most enticing came from renowned director George Stevens. Stevens was set to direct a film adaptation of the book Giant, a multi-generational epic about an oil family, a sort of precursor to the TV show Dynasty. Stevens admired Rock's on-screen charisma and manly swagger, and wanted him for the lead role of Bick Benedict, a strong yet stubborn oil tycoon whose determination borders on self-destruction. Rock was eager to take on the role. It was more complex and nuanced than the flawless, perfect heroes he'd been portraying, but there was an obstacle. Giant was a Warner Brothers production, and Rock was under contract with Universal. Stevens requested that Universal loan Rock out for the film, but the studio executives initially refused. The shoot was expected to be lengthy, and Universal didn't want to lose their top star for months. Rock, however, was determined to secure the role. According to some sources, he took his case directly to Ed Mole, Universal's head of production, who was rumored to have a desperate crush on Rock. According to Rock, Ed usually spent their time together on his knees. Whatever transpired during that meeting, it worked. Shortly afterward, Rock's loan out to Warner Brothers was approved, clearing the way for him to star in Giant. This role would prove to be a turning point in Rock's career, showcasing his ability to handle more complex and challenging characters. Before filming began, director George Stevens told Rock that Bick Benedict needed to be rugged, virile, a paragon of masculinity, a type of character Rock had played countless times. But Stevens wanted more than just the usual bravado. He wanted depth, a hidden emotional side that only those closest to the character could see. To help Rock prepare, Stevens took him to a screening room where he showed him hours of footage featuring what he considered cinema's greatest leading men. Among them were Gary Cooper and Spencer Tracy. It's noteworthy that Stevens chose these two actors. In the 1920s, it was an open secret in Hollywood that Gary Cooper had a close relationship with actor Anderson Lawler. Similarly, those who knew Spencer Tracy often spoke of his discreet hookups with men. However, given the times, neither Cooper nor Tracy ever spoke publicly about these relationships. Denials of homosexuality were expected back then, and many who knew them, including Katharine Hepburn, staunchly defended their privacy. Hepburn, known for protecting those close to her, once told biographer Ann Edwards, quote, "I don't care what you write, as long as it's not the truth." Despite the public denials, telegrams and letters reveal affectionate language between Gary Cooper and Anderson Lawler, as well as a close relationship between Spencer Tracy and sportsman Timothy Durant. These relationships were well known among Hollywood insiders, but remained hidden from the public. Stevens essentially wanted Rock to study two actors who, despite their queer personal lives, had crafted indelible images of rugged masculinity on screen. Rock Hudson dedicated himself to preparing for his role in Giant. After immersing himself in his studies, he headed to Texas to join the rest of the cast. Right away, tension brewed when he met his co-star, the young and rebellious James Dean. Dean had recently made a name for himself as a troubled youth in Rebel Without a Cause, and did not get along with Rock. He frequently stepped on Rock's lines, upstaged him in scenes, and pulled focus away. Off-camera, Dean's attitude was even more contentious. He was standoffish and openly hostile towards Rock. According to those who knew him, James Dean viewed Rock as a hypocrite for playing roles so different from his real-life persona. Dean, a student of method acting, believed performances should be rooted in genuine, personal experiences. This approach was evident in Rebel Without a Cause, where Dean had instructed his co-star, bisexual actor Sal Mineo, to play his character as if he were in love with Dean's character. Rock, however, preferred to maintain a clear distinction between himself and his characters. As tensions on set escalated, Rock sought an escape from the hostility. He found solace in his friendship with another legendary co-star, Elizabeth Taylor. Taylor, who had been acting since childhood, was similarly trained to project a specific public image. Like Rock, she had been coached to embody the perfect persona, her graceful and poised femininity mirroring Rock's rugged and coarse masculinity. The relief they found in each other's company was indescribable, a friendship that became intensely important towards the end of Rock's life. Away from the prying eyes of Hollywood, they let their guards down and simply had fun. They made each other laugh during takes and went out drinking together. During a hailstorm, they even ran around, gathering chunks of ice for their drinks, resulting in bruises from the hailstones. One memorable night, they invented a chocolate martini, indulging so much that they were sick during their scenes the next day. Their camaraderie and visible enjoyment led to suspicions back in Los Angeles. Taylor's husband, producer Michael Todd, became convinced she was having an affair with Rock. Similarly, Rock's wife Phyllis grew concerned. Both Phyllis and Todd traveled to the set to check on their spouses. What they found, however, was no evidence of an affair. Instead, they discovered two actors who, under the relentless pressure to maintain their public images, had finally found a space to breathe and be themselves, far from Hollywood's scrutiny. Rock Hudson and Elizabeth Taylor's on-screen chemistry in Giant was stunning. Even in the most serious scenes, they formed a compelling and loving couple. When the film premiered in November 1956, it was an immediate hit, earning numerous Oscar nominations, including one for Rock. Thrilled by the recognition, Rock hoped this success would lead to more interesting and complex roles, portraying flawed men struggling with their masculinity and vulnerability. However, the roles that followed were disappointingly one-dimensional. Simple, pure-hearted war hero, a noble reporter, a selfless soldier. Despite his aspirations for nuance and depth, directors continued to cast Rock in uncomplicated roles, essentially reducing him to a handsome figure. Even after the success of Giant, he remained, quote, good scenery, just as he had been in his first film. The image of the perfect man had been so meticulously crafted for Rock that he found it impossible to break free from it. Rock's best chance at a more complicated role came in the adaptation of William Faulkner's The Tarnished Angels. The character was a complex, disreputable man, a stark contrast to the clean-cut roles Rock was known for. To prepare, Rock bought a shabby suit and used shoes to look genuinely down on his luck. But when studio executives saw him, they were furious. Quote, "You can't play the part like that. You're a star. You have to be well-dressed," they insisted. In their eyes, Rock could only appear in polished, clean-cut roles, regardless of the character's true nature. With each film, it became increasingly clear that Rock's desires and ambitions didn't matter to the people around him. What mattered was maintaining his image as the perfect man, both on the screen and off. The pressure to maintain his public image took a heavy toll on both Rock Hudson and, by extension, his wife Phyllis. Since their marriage, Rock had been working non-stop, filming, traveling, and promoting his movies. Phyllis started to feel increasingly left out and neglected. When she visited him on set, he ignored her, and when he was home, his mind seemed elsewhere. In truth, Rock was wildly frustrated by his inability to pursue relationships with other men. Both Rock and Phyllis were under immense pressure and deeply unhappy, leading to frequent conflicts. The breaking point came during a press tour in Italy organized by Universal Studios. In her memoir, Phyllis recounted an incident while they were walking through Rome. They heard someone calling Rock's name and turned to see a handsome Italian man approaching them. Rock explained that he had met the man years earlier while filming a war movie in Italy. As Phyllis watched the two men catch up and make plans to meet the next day, it was clear to her that this was more than a casual reunion. She was watching the planning of a potential hookup right in front of her, even if she couldn't immediately recognize her husband's interest in it. After the Italian man left, Rock and Phyllis got into a bitter argument. In her frustration, Phyllis used a homophobic slur to describe the man, and Rock responded by slapping her. This moment marked a turning point in their already strained relationship. Despite attempts to reconcile, the trust between Rock and Phyllis was irreparably damaged. Rock spent even less time at home and began seeing other men. Phyllis, fed up with the situation, confronted Rock about his sexuality and hired a private investigator to plant a secret tape recorder in their house. The recording captured a heart-wrenching conversation in which Phyllis asked Rock to confirm that he was gay. Rock broke down in tears, and Phyllis told him he was destroying his career. Rock pleaded that it wasn't something he could change and expressed his fear of losing her. They eventually changed the subject, but by then, Phyllis was already planning their divorce. Many have hunted for the recording, including myself, but it seems someone has scrubbed its existence from the internet. Sensing the impending end of their marriage, Rock eventually walked out, leaving a note saying that it was time to part ways. The divorce proceedings were swift, and after just 3 years, their marriage was over. The breakup was hard on both of them and divided their friends, many of whom felt compelled to take sides. Mark and George, the couple who had always supported Rock, were particularly furious about how he had treated Phyllis and stopped talking to him for a year. With his marriage to Phyllis over, Rock Hudson needed to revamp his public image. An opportunity arose in 1959 thanks to producer Ross Hunter, who had given Rock his first starring role in romantic films. Hunter was now working with Doris Day, a singer with a wholesome, clean-cut image, and wanted to cast her in something more daring, a sexy romantic comedy with Rock Hudson as the leading man. When Hunter approached Rock about starring in a rom-com, Rock was skeptical. He had only ever done serious melodramas, but Hunter insisted that Rock's serious approach to a funny role could make it even more hilarious. Convinced, Rock agreed, and they began working on a film called Pillow Talk. In Pillow Talk, Rock Hudson plays a character who, despite despising his neighbor, played by Doris Day, has only interacted with her over the phone. When he accidentally meets her in person at a nightclub, he recognizes her and decides to deceive her by posing as a shy Southern gentleman, with the intention of making her fall in love with him. However, the plan backfires as he unexpectedly falls for her, leading to a series of comedic and romantic complications. The plotline mirrors elements of Hudson's own life. The film even featured a sequence where Hudson's character pretends to be gay, a bold move considering the era's social climate. The innuendo in this scene was daring for the time, and pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable under the Production Code Administration, which eventually intervened to soften the implications. Given the ongoing rumors about Hudson's sexuality, this plot point added a layer of irony and tension to the film. Despite these challenges, the movie ends with Hudson's character revealing that his supposed homosexuality was merely a ruse, ensuring that the film concluded with traditional heterosexual pairings. Audiences were charmed by Hudson's comedic performance, and Pillow Talk became a significant success. This led Universal Studios to quickly produce more romantic comedies featuring Hudson, many of which included subtle references to queer subtexts. For instance, in Lover Come Back, Hudson's character once again adopts a false identity, while in Strange Bedfellows, his character is pressured to change his lifestyle, a clear nod to societal expectations. In this film, Hudson's character even shares a bed with another man, a scenario that further teased the audience with its underlying implications. Another film, A Very Special Favor, includes a line from Hudson's character's psychiatrist subtly referring to the actor's hidden struggles, quote, "Hiding in closets isn't going to cure you." Despite the frequent gay innuendo, the films always affirmed Rock's character's heterosexuality by the end. These romantic comedies proved incredibly successful and became the roles Rock is perhaps best remembered for. However, despite their success, Rock started to grow weary of these type of roles too. By the 1960s, Rock Hudson was growing increasingly tired of his longtime agent, Henry Wilson. Despite sticking with Henry over the years, Rock had always resented him for pushing him into a marriage with Phyllis and for taking credit for all his success. Adding to his frustration was the fact that Henry had advised him to pass on roles he really wanted, like the lead in Ben-Hur, which ultimately went to Charlton Heston and won him an Oscar. Henry, however, remained unfazed by Rock's dissatisfaction. He believed Rock needed him and didn't have the nerve to fire him. But Henry wasn't counting on one significant change. In 1964, Rock met Tom Clark, a press agent who worked at MGM. There was an instant attraction, and they began dating secretly. As part of Hollywood's PR machine, Tom was well aware of Henry's sleazy reputation and started urging Rock to get rid of him. Rock resisted at first, but things began to change when Henry picked up a new client named Dick Scholler. Henry became totally obsessed with him, renaming him Chance Gentry and showering him with attention. This left Rock feeling neglected and increasingly jealous. Eventually, he reached his breaking point. With Tom by his side, Rock called Henry to end their professional relationship, trying to let him down easy, emphasizing that it was just business. Henry didn't take it well. He screamed at Rock, claiming he had no talent and threatening to expose all of Rock's secrets. In a particularly dramatic moment, Henry even claimed he had a jar of acid he would throw at Rock's face. It was a rough breakup, possibly the roughest of Rock's life. After leaving Henry, Rock went through a series of agents, but none were as skilled at selecting roles for him. This led to a string of flops from the mid-1960s into the early 1970s, including low-budget war films, a soggy heist movie, and a jaw-dropping sex comedy called Pretty Maids All in a Row. Initially promising, Pretty Maids All in a Row was written by Star Trek's Gene Roddenberry and boasted an all-star cast. Originally, football player Joe Namath was set to play the main villain, a sex-addicted high school coach who kills his students. After he dropped out, the producer's wife suggested Rock after seeing him swimming. Rock, with his handsome looks and a new mustache, took the role. However, audiences were not ready to see their romantic hero play an outright villain. The film, further compromised by MGM's cuts to avoid an X rating, was panned by critics. Roger Ebert called it embarrassing. As his movie career spiraled, Rock turned to other media. He starred in a made-for-TV movie called Once Upon a Dead Man, playing a San Francisco cop who solves crimes with his wife. The film did well enough that NBC turned it into a series, Macmillan and Wife, and for the next few years, the show filled NBC's schedule between episodes of Columbo. It paid well, but Rock found the fast-paced filming frustrating, feeling it didn't allow him to do his best work. He also ventured into music, teaming up with singer-songwriter Rod McKuen, who had a huge crush on him. They recorded songs for an album called Rock Gently. Rod claimed Rock had the best singing voice he'd ever heard, though that might have been the crush talking. Beautiful people are often treated differently from those who are moderately pleasant-looking, and Rock Hudson was no exception. At the start of his career, he was told to make his voice lower by getting sick and then screaming for hours, a technique that ruined his ability to sing. When Rock played his album Rock Gently for friends, they struggled to find anything nice to say. The album sales were disastrous. Rock ended up buying many copies himself to avoid the embarrassment of them gathering dust in record stores. He canceled plans for a follow-up album, Rock for the Fun of It, while Reputation was entering a nosedive. Just a few years earlier, the Theater Owners of America had named him Actor of the Year. He had received a star on the Walk of Fame, and a film industry trade group had ranked him as the #1 box office draw for 7 consecutive years. But by the mid-1960s, Rock's ranking dropped to number 2, then to number 10, and by 1970, he was off the list completely. As if things couldn't get any worse, another setback came along. It started as a joke among a group of men in Long Beach. They threw a party and sent out invitations jokingly announcing the marriage of Rock Hudson and another closeted actor, Jim Nabors. There was no truth in the joke. Rock and Jim were friends, and their playful interactions could be seen on episodes of The Carol Burnett Show, but they were never romantic. Rock's housekeeper quipped at the time, quote, "Rock would never date Jim. Jim's not even blonde." Somehow the joke invitations reached someone who believed they were real, and rumors had started to spread. Radio DJs joked about it. Gossip columnists fueled speculation, and Mad Magazine even posted a comic about it. At first, Rock and Jim tried to ignore the rumors, a strategy that had worked in the past. But Rock no longer had a ruthless agent like Henry Wilson to quash the rumors, and the story refused to die down. Rock was even heckled at a movie premiere, with onlookers shouting slurs at him. To finally put the rumors to rest, Rock and Jim gave separate interviews denying the allegations. They asserted they were neither in a relationship nor gay. While this helped quiet things down, the damage was already done. Jim's variety show was quietly canceled, and Rock's reputation took a significant hit. By the late 1970s, many producers saw Rock Hudson as a liability. They feared that casting him as a romantic lead would invite ridicule from audiences. As a result, the roles he was offered became increasingly unappealing. One such role came from director Roger Corman, who approached Rock about starring in a disaster movie called Avalanche. Believing that disaster movies would be popular in the 70s, Rock agreed. However, while disaster movies might have been a trend, this particular movie was not. Known for his low-budget, schlocky films, Corman's Avalanche turned out to be nearly unwatchable. Rock's friends could see he was struggling, and they stepped in to help. Mark and George, the couple who had taken him under their wing when he first moved to LA, helped him manage his business affairs, something he had always found challenging. Another lifeline came from Carol Burnett, who had become friendly with Rock after his appearances on her show. In the 1970s, Carol invited Rock to join her in a touring production of the romantic comedy musical I Do, I Do. Despite having little experience with live theater, Rock decided to give it a try. As they toured, Rock had a blast. He and Carol would clown around on stage, making each other laugh. Rock enjoyed the experience so much that he signed on for additional tours the following summer. It was during one of these theatrical tours that he made an intriguing new friend, a connection that would prove significant in his later years. During a tour stop in San Francisco, Rock Hudson met a young writer named Armistead Maupin. Armistead was just beginning work on a serialized story about life in San Francisco, set to be published under the title Tales of the City. Being a bit younger, Armistead had grown up idolizing Rock as a screen icon and sex symbol. In fact, he had often mentioned Rock in the first chapter of his story. Flattered, Rock invited Armistead back to his hotel for a party with friends. At the party, after some drinks, Rock hushed the crowd and did a dramatic reading of Armistead's story, much to the writer's delight. Armistead later recalled, quote, "I think he sort of expected it to charm the pants off of me, and it more or less did." This marked the beginning of a close friendship. Armistead introduced Rock to the vibrant gay culture of San Francisco, taking him to the Castro, gay bookstores, coffee shops, and nightclubs. Rock had never seen such openness and was fascinated by it. Armistead shared with Rock that he had recently come out to his family, describing the experience as a huge relief. He encouraged Rock to do the same, to break free from the lies that had been constructed around him by agents, studios, and gossip magazines. Armistead felt part of a new generation that wanted to show the world it didn't have to be that way. The idea was tempting for Rock, especially after Armistead and his friends took him to some of San Francisco's busier bathhouses. One friend recalled, quote, "We watched Rock walk around and go into a booth, and you could hear this scream, 'Oh my God, it's Rock Hudson. Wow, he's a big one, isn't he?'" Seeing how liberating coming out had been for Armistead and his friends, Rock began to want that freedom for himself. However, wanting it and actually doing it were two different things. Rock had spent his entire career building a public persona that mirrored the characters he played on screen. He feared that if he discarded that image, there would be nothing left. He discussed it with his boyfriend, Tom, who was strongly opposed to the idea. Tom, who was Rock's partner at the time, said, quote, "Not until my mother dies." Rock found this response puzzling, thinking, if I was sleeping with Rock Hudson, I would want my mother to know immediately. Ultimately, Rock decided he couldn't come out. He believed it was feasible for the younger generation, but for someone of his age and stature, it seemed impossible. It was around this time that Rock received an invitation that would change his life. Years earlier, Rock Hudson had been friendly with his first leading lady, Jane Wyman, and her ex-husband, Ronald Reagan, along with his new wife, Nancy. When Reagan was elected president in 1890, he often invited his old Hollywood connections to the White House. In the early 80s, he and Nancy invited Rock to a banquet, and Rock happily attended. However, Nancy noticed something concerning. She told Rock he looked worryingly thin, and when the photos from the event were published, Rock's close friends, Mark and George, noticed a strange mark on the back of his neck. They begged him to get it checked out, but Rock, not feeling worried, kept putting it off. Finally, they convinced him to see a doctor and get some tests. That's when Rock received devastating news. He tested positive for a mysterious new illness. Doctors didn't know much about it then. It had only recently been named AIDS. What they did know was that it tended to affect gay men and had no known cure. When Rock asked how dangerous it was, his doctor took a long pause before advising him to get his affairs in order. The diagnosis threw Rock into a panic. In 1984, the social stigma around HIV was intense. If word got out, not only would it confirm the rumors that he was gay, but the association with a deadly disease would destroy everything he had worked so hard to build. He confided in a close inner circle, initially only telling his friends Mark and George. They were stunned, but agreed that, for Rock's safety, no one else could know. Mark and George immediately began researching medical care. Back then, treatments for HIV were experimental and unproven. They found a doctor in France who had some success with a drug called HPA-23. Reluctantly, Rock agreed to go. Mark and George booked the appointment and pushed him onto a plane. At the clinic in France, Rock met with Dr. Dominique Dormant, who explained the procedure. HPA-23 might prevent the virus from replicating. It wasn't a cure, but it could potentially stop the spread. The catch? Rock would have to undergo regular treatments at the clinic for the next few months and avoid any strain, meaning no acting roles for the foreseeable future. This was a tough pill to swallow. Acting was the center of Rock's world, his whole identity. Complicating matters further, just as he arrived in France, Rock received a tempting offer from Aaron Spelling, the producer of the TV hit series Dynasty. Spelling wanted to add a touch of golden age Hollywood class to the show and asked Rock to appear in several episodes as a handsome, manly love interest. If audiences liked his character, they planned to create a whole new spin-off series just for him. Rock faced an agonizing choice: stay in France for a treatment that might prolong his life, or return to Hollywood to take on a role that might boost his career. Essentially, he had to choose between Rock the person and Rock the product. Initially, he stalled the Dynasty producers for a few days as his treatment began, telling them he was thinking it over and wasn't sure it was right for him. Back in LA, the Dynasty team was puzzled. How could it not be right? They had created the role specifically for him. He'd played similar roles countless times before. After a week or two, Dynasty co-creator Esther Sperino flew to Paris to personally beg Rock to appear on the show. They desperately wanted Rock Hudson. No one else would do. Rock asked for more time to think it over, but at this point, about a month had passed since he started treatment, and the doctors had some good news. His viral load was dropping. The drug was working. Believing he was cured, Rock cut short the treatment and booked a flight back to LA to shoot his episodes. When Rock Hudson returned to the United States, his friends Mark and George were deeply concerned. They could see that he still wasn't well. He was tired, gaunt, and forgetful. They urged him to rest, not work, warning that if he appeared in front of cameras in his current state, everyone would notice something was wrong. But Rock felt he couldn't back out now. In early 1985, he arrived on the set of Dynasty, ready to take on his new role. The storyline was reminiscent of the dramatic roles he had played in the 1950s. A stoic, strong, confident man, successful and uncomplicated. His character's romance with Linda Evans' character, Crystal, developing over several episodes, culminated in a kiss. That kiss filled Rock with dread. About a year earlier, scientists had determined that casual conduct was unlikely to spread HIV, but the science was still new. There was no federal guidance on how to avoid the risk of transmission in such situations. Rock did what he could to keep Linda safe. Before the scene, he scrubbed his mouth with a disinfecting agent, and when the cameras rolled, he kept his lips clamped tight to avoid any exchange of saliva. Linda Evans noticed that something was off. She didn't know what exactly was going on with Rock, but she had observed his extreme stress and exhaustion over the last few days. Quote, "I knew he knew how to kiss passionately," she later recalled, "and that's why I was surprised. He's a fine actor. He knows what he's doing, so it was confusing." Despite her confusion, Linda didn't want to make a scene or draw attention to Rock's condition. They finished the shot and moved on. As filming on Dynasty was wrapping up, Rock Hudson received a call from an old friend, Doris Day. Doris, who had starred alongside Rock in those beloved romantic comedies of the 60s, was launching a new talk show and wanted him to make an appearance. Once again, Mark and George tried to dissuade him. The Dynasty shoot had been exhausting, and they feared another appearance could seriously harm his health and, if he showed up looking unwell, damage his image. But Rock couldn't be talked out of it. He had genuine affection for Doris and felt he owed her a favor. "I'll be there. You can count on me," he promised. Rock's friends knew they could always count on him, and he wasn't about to let Doris down. When Rock arrived to film the segment, it was clear to everyone that he wasn't well. In the weeks since filming Dynasty, he had lost significant weight and was physically weak. You can see Doris supporting him as they walk, but you can also see the genuine joy on Rock's face at reuniting with his friend after so many years. After the shoot, Doris expressed her concern. She thought Rock might have cancer or an infection from a bad bout of the flu. Rock tried to reassure her, reminiscing about the good old days, but his strength was failing and he could barely stay conscious. He eventually apologized and claimed he had another engagement, but Doris knew it wasn't true. She could tell he was on the verge of collapse, 2 days later, Rock was on a plane back to Paris. When Rock arrived, he was severely dehydrated and struggling to breathe. He made it to the American hospital, but the doctors there were unaware of his HIV status and thought he was having heart problems. To make matters worse, Dr. Dominique Dormant, who had been treating him, didn't have admitting privileges at the American hospital and wasn't allowed to visit or treat Rock. For Dr. Dormant to take over Rock's care, they needed to transfer him to Percy Military Hospital, which was run by the French military. However, Percy officials denied the request, citing a policy against admitting Americans. Mark and George, now terrified for Rock's life, enlisted the help of a publicist to send a desperate telegram to the only people they could think of for help, Ronald and Nancy Reagan. They begged the Reagans to intercede with the President of France to get permission for the transfer. White House records show the telegram was received, and a top aide conferred with Nancy Reagan. Her response, documented in a 1985 White House memo, was chilling. She did not feel this was something the White House should get involved in, and that was it. Rock was on his own. Meanwhile, things were getting ugly at the American hospital in Paris. Staffers had discovered Rock's HIV status and were enraged, not wanting their facility associated with AIDS. They threatened that if Rock's people didn't get him transferred, they would go to the press with everything. That Rock was gay, had full-blown AIDS, and was near death. The press had already caught wind that Rock was at the hospital, and the place was swarming with reporters. Rock's friends frantically tried to contain the rumors, but speculation was rampant.
Just what is wrong with Rock Hudson? Tonight, the 59-year-old actor remains in a Paris hospital undergoing tests, but the nature of his illness has become clouded in mystery and confusion. Yesterday, it was reported that Hudson had liver cancer and possibly AIDS. But today, the hospital denied the cancer story and said nothing about the AIDS rumor. A spokesman just said Hudson was tired.
At this point, Rock had a close circle of trusted people looking after him. His friend Mark had flown to Paris to be by his side. Rock's publicist was finally in the loop, and a French publicist named Yannou Couillard, one of Rock's close personal friends, was also present. Realizing it was only a matter of time before the news leaked, they decided to get ahead of it and make an announcement. Yannou volunteered to write the statement. At 2 p.m., she stepped out of the hospital to face a swarm of reporters. The rest of the group watched from Rock's bedside as she read the statement.
Actor Rock Hudson has AIDS, acquired immune deficiency syndrome. The news of Hudson's illness was revealed in Paris Thursday. CNN's Don Lennox has more.
The confusion surrounding the condition of Rock Hudson has at least in part been explained. Thursday in Paris, where Hudson has been hospitalized at the Pasteur Institute of the American Hospital, his press spokesman confirmed to reporters what had been rumored, that the 59-year-old star does have AIDS.
Mr. Rock Hudson has acquired immune deficiency syndrome.
Collard said that Hudson had known about his illness for more than a year after being diagnosed by doctors in California. It was those doctors who had suggested he go back to Paris.
With this revelation, years of carefully constructed myths about Rock Hudson, staged dates, planted news stories, a sham marriage, were torn down in an instant. To Rock's surprise, the announcement was met with an outpouring of love. Telegrams began pouring in immediately. His friend Elizabeth Taylor wrote that by coming forward, Rock would help destigmatize the virus and save millions of lives. Messages of support came from Carol Burnett, Frank Sinatra, Tony Curtis, Gregory Peck, and even Madonna, who told Rock that he'd been her heartthrob since childhood and sent him all of her love. Rock was incredulous. He told Mark, "I don't even know Madonna." But it wasn't just celebrities. The hospital was flooded with messages from people around the world. They didn't know Rock personally, but they felt that they knew him through his films and TV roles. To his amazement, now that they saw the real him, they stood by him. The next day, Rock felt well enough to move, and his friends asked if he wanted to stay in the hospital or return home. Rock expressed his wish to die in his own bed. As the weight of what was happening sank in, he half smiled and said, What'll I do for an encore? As Rock's friends wanted to get him home, a controversy was brewing in Hollywood. The revelation of Rock's HIV status caused concern in the industry, especially about his on-screen kiss with Linda Evans in Dynasty. Despite scientific evidence that HIV couldn't be transmitted through saliva, many began pushing for new rules to prevent HIV-positive actors from working. But industry leaders pushed back. Among them was Ed Asner, the president of the Screen Actors Guild, and Linda Evans herself. She publicly supported Rock and emphasized that her only concern was for his well-being. In the wake of the controversy surrounding Rock Hudson's HIV diagnosis, many actors wanted to show solidarity with their friends affected by HIV. In the years that followed, they found a powerful symbol to do just that: the red ribbon, created by the Visual AIDS Artists Caucus in New York. Watching footage of award shows, especially in the 90s, you'll see almost everyone wearing a red ribbon on their lapel. This ribbon signaled their support for colleagues with HIV and their stand against discrimination. But this symbol of solidarity was still years away. With Rock's health failing, the immediate concern was getting him home. They reached out to various airlines, but the response was disheartening. We don't take AIDS people on board. Undeterred, they rented a private jet to fly him back to the US. As soon as he was home, his friends began a vigil by his side. Many of his friends visited, including Elizabeth Taylor, who snuck into the hospital via the loading dock to avoid the press. When she saw Rock, she pulled back the covers, climbed into bed, and held him in her arms. This was a time when many people, even healthcare workers, were afraid to touch those with HIV. About a month after returning home, Rock's health began to decline rapidly. Summoning his friends, he told them that he had decided to authorize a memoir, a tell-all book that would finally share the honest story of his life. He wanted the proceeds from the book to go towards programs supporting the treatment and prevention of HIV. He found a writer named Sarah Davidson, whom he trusted to tell his story, and urged his friends to be completely open with her, holding nothing back. His friends promised to honor his wishes. Early in the morning of October 2nd, 1985, Rock Hudson passed away in his sleep. The news of his death was met with an outpouring of grief and sympathy. At the gates of his home, friends emerged to inform the media that Rock was gone. The memoir Rock authorized, published in 1986, raised a significant amount of money for HIV research and support. But beyond its financial success, the book galvanized numerous other HIV fundraisers. The knowledge that this beautiful, handsome man beloved by everyone had faced such a harrowing disease changed public perception. Rock's physician remarked, "Rock Hudson was the single most influential AIDS patient in history. His diagnosis and subsequent public disclosure transformed the way the disease was perceived. Millions of dollars started pouring into various nonprofits. Just days after his death, Congress allocated $221 million for medical research, maintaining that funding over the following years. Recognizing the need for a coordinated effort to ensure this money was used effectively, a coalition of groups founded AMFAR, the American Foundation for AIDS Research, AMFAR. The foundation was launched with a $250,000 donation from the sales of Rock's memoir and was chaired by his friend, Elizabeth Taylor.
I guess it's second nature, really, to turn away and to ignore what is heartbreaking, what is unattractive, what's not pretty. We gravitate toward what's easy in life, and there's nothing easy about AIDS except contacting it.
Ladies and gentlemen, for her bold support of gay and lesbian community before the invention of a gay movement and her superhuman fight against AIDS, I'd like to present the GLAAD Vanguard Award to my stepmother, Elizabeth Taylor. Hi!
Thank you for inviting me here. Can I come every night? But to be serious, I did not become an activist to win awards. I became an activist to try to protect people. I could not sit silently by just doing nothing. I started my activism in the 80s when a new disease emerged that was quickly and inexplicably killing people. So I got involved. All of my life I've spent a lot of time with gay men, Montgomery Clift, Jimmy Dean, Rock Hudson, who were my colleagues, co-workers, confidants, my closest friends. But I never thought of them of who they slept with. They were just the people I loved. I could never understand why they couldn't be afforded the same rights and protections as all of the rest of us. There is no gay agenda. It's a human agenda. All of us should be treated the same. Those against gay marriages say marriage should only be between a man and a woman. God, I of all people know that that doesn't always work. Why shouldn't gay people be able to live as open and freely as everybody else? What it comes down to ultimately is love. How can anything bad come out of love? The bad stuff comes out of mistrust, misunderstanding, and God knows from hate. During my life, I've seen many things, good and bad, but the bad things never came out of loving acts, loving gestures, or loving relationships. That's why I'm here tonight, to celebrate you and your families. Long live love.
Since its inception, AMFAR has distributed thousands of grants globally, supporting teams that developed rapid HIV tests, drugs that make HIV a manageable condition, educational programs on reducing risk, and even clinical trials for an HIV vaccine. As Elizabeth Taylor predicted, Rock's impact was indeed saving millions of lives. Rock Hudson's announcement brought hope to many who felt hopeless. He spent his life split between two personas: the personal, private version, a gentle, shy man who preferred needlepoint to sports and just wanted to be loved, and the public version, an icon of rugged American masculinity. When the wall between these personas suddenly came down, the world saw the real man behind the image. Overwhelmingly, the response was supportive. He inadvertently changed the course of history regarding AIDS, becoming the first star to make such a profound impact. Arguably, there hasn't been one since who has matched his influence. In my research into Rock's life, I discovered many fascinating stories that I couldn't fit into this script. From the intricate details of his marriage to the subtle, very gay subtext hiding just below the surface of his films, there's just so much more to uncover. Rock Hudson's life was a constant balancing act between maintaining his public image and hiding his true self. The relentless scrutiny and fear of exposure added layers of challenge, loneliness, and unfulfillment to his already complicated life. Imagine achieving your dreams but never being able to live them authentically or share them with the world. The applause and admiration from fans were hollow, masking a deep yearning for genuine love and acceptance. As a queer person, Hudson's story resonates deeply with me. It's different from our usual focus on specific films, but it embodies the dark side of Hollywood integral to this podcast. Stories that are hidden from the public, yet still affect our relationships with the films or stars they affected. Rock Hudson's story isn't just about a Hollywood icon. It's a lens through which we can see the struggles of countless individuals forced to live behind a mask. As we've journeyed through his life, from his rise as the epitome of American masculinity to his tragic decline under the weight of a relentless disease, we're confronted with hard truths about our society. Because Rock's story isn't unique. It represents the mental torture we inflict on those who don't fit into neat societal boxes. This dichotomy of public and private persona is a powerful reminder of the pain of living inauthentically, a pain that we still see today. Rock Hudson's life compels us to re-examine our classic cinema with a more critical eye. These films, which have shaped our cultural landscape, were built on the sacrifices of actors like Rock, who endured immense personal struggles to entertain us. Understanding his struggles deepens our appreciation of these films and the people who brought them to life. It's not just about feeling sad for a life stifled by societal expectations, but about recognizing the immense strength it took for Rock to maintain his facade and the public impact of his eventual vulnerability. In sharing his story, we honor his legacy, not as a tragic figure, but as a symbol of resilience and courage. His journey through a hostile industry and society teaches us the importance of authenticity and the devastating effects of its absence. Hudson's life and death sparked conversations and actions since that have saved millions of lives, showing us that even in our darkest moments, we can inspire change. This episode of Cinematic Secrets aspires to peel back the layers of Hollywood's glossy exterior, to reveal the hidden battles and silent sacrifices. Rock Hudson's story forces us to confront our prejudices and the systems that perpetuate them. It's a call to action to create a world where no one has to hide who they are. So what do we take from his story? It's a reminder to be kinder, to challenge societal norms, and to support those who bravely live their truth. His life and legacy teach us that true strength lies in vulnerability, and that the fight for acceptance is far from over. We can honor Rock's legacy by advocating for a world where everyone can live authentically. Rock Hudson once said, "I have learned that life is not a straight line, but a circle. We all come back to where we started."